Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Council Chambers on this beautiful December 11th day. And today is the last council meeting for 2023. Can't imagine where the time has gone. It seems like it goes pretty fast. I think each and every year that I sit at this table, the years go by faster. So I'm not too sure if I am getting older or is just everything's better, easier to understand that just kind of rolls into one day. As I mentioned, it's December 11th. It is, even though that there is very little snow outside, there's only 13 days till Christmas Eve. So make sure you get all your ducks in a row and buy the presents that you need, because in 2 weeks, you're buying what you can find on the shelves. So take the opportunity now in the next 2 weeks to buy what you want and not what you have to buy. Members of council, there is agenda before you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'd just like to say, I've heard that as you get older, it eventually, that speed thing hits like a terminal velocity, and then it doesn't speed up after that. So you must be getting near that.
Oh, so when I hit the wall, I won't go any further.
That's the max speed, yeah. Anyhow, I'd like to make a motion that Town Council adopted December 11th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Administration, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of council, call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, moving on to number 3 of our agenda is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents and stakeholders to talk to council on anything that's not on the current agenda. Administration, has anybody registered to speak at public input session?
Through Your Worship, no one has registered.
Okay. Is there anybody in the gallery who would like to speak to council on anything that's not on the current agenda? Would you like to speak? Yeah. Please come in.
Through Your Worship, this gentleman is here for the public hearing, which we have not opened yet.
Okay, so it's not the public input session, this is the public hearing? Okay. My apologies. Okay, anybody else in the chambers like to talk to council on anything that's not on the agenda? So this is for the public input session. Any concerns, issues that people would like to share with council? Okay. See none, we'll move on. Number 4 of our agenda is presentations and delegations. There is none tonight, but number 5, moving on, is that we have a statutory public hearing today, and it's the public advertising bylaw. Administration?
Good evening, Your Worship, and all of council. I'm here to present the public advertisement bylaw. Again, this is the public hearing presentation for bylaw 2681.
Okay, just before you start, just make sure you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, just so for us to be clear, so this is a public bylaw hearing. Again, it is in accordance with section 216.4 and 606.1 of the Municipal Government Act, to make sure that we're holding that and gives the opportunity of residents and stakeholders to the opportunity to speak to a proposed bylaw. How this goes is administration will make the presentation. Council has the opportunity to ask for questions for clarity and understanding. After that, then all those that the applicant is given the opportunity to speak, which is the town of Stony Plain. We also get, as council members, get to ask questions of clarity and understanding. Then all those that are in favor of the proposal is allowed to speak, and then council gets to ask questions for clarity and understanding. All those that are opposed to the proposed changes to the bylaw have the opportunity to speak, and then council gets to ask questions for clarity and understanding. And then all those, after that, then all those have a general comment about the proposed changes to the bylaw have the opportunity to speak and address council. And again, council gets to ask questions for clarity and understanding. And just to remind all participants, everything gets run through me as the chair, and it's not an opportunity for debate. It is a time for asking questions for clarity and understanding. Okay. And with that, after that, then the applicant gets to summarize if they like. And then from that, we'll close and declare the public hearing closed. And then the business item later on will be dealt with on item number 8 under the public advertising bylaw, 8.1. Okay. Go ahead, Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship, for the context. So we've got 4 different parts to the presentation here: the legal requirements, the current process, a jurisdictional scan, and the proposed approach. As some background to this project, in 2017, the Municipal Government Act was updated to provide municipalities with more enabling powers towards public advertisements. Specifically, the ability to determine how to provide notice and advertisement. This included allowing municipalities to tailor the process to meet the needs of their specific community. And to leverage this power, an authorizing bylaw must be adopted, which is the one before you here. In terms of the scope, we're talking about location-specific planning bylaws as well as statutory advertisements. Things that are out of scope are things such as tax auctions, capital projects, infrastructure and public works, and general community engagement, as well as surveys. Currently under the MGA, Section 606, which governs notice of bylaws, resolutions, meetings, public hearings, and other things, they must be posted in the newspaper, they must be mailed to properties in the area, or as directed by a bylaw such as what's before you today. Again, it's any one of these 3 items. For Stony Plain, there's location-specific bylaws as well as general ones. Currently, to provide notice of a public hearing, we do this through the Stony Plain Reporter twice, 2 consecutive weeks. We post it on the town website, and we complete a mail out to loosely a 90 to 300 meter radius. As well as starting in 2023, we've had the applicant post a sign on the site. In addition to this, since we've stood up the Planning Advisory Committee, we've been bringing it to them for additional comments. In terms of general ones that are not location-specific, again, we do the same thing with the Stony Plain Reporter. Once a week for 2 consecutive weeks, we post it on the town's website, and in some cases where additional engagement's been requested, we've done social media where it can be leveraged if desired. In terms of the jurisdictional scan, we've looked at various other municipalities, as denoted in the table here, indicating which ones have a policy or bylaw in place. And as you can kind of see in terms of how are the advertisements done, many also use their websites. Some post in the newspaper, usually just once in the case of where there's a bylaw present. And again, there's some additional examples where things are either posted or generally just posted on the sign on the site where applicable. In terms of the proposed process, we're recommending that prior to the public hearing, advertisement is done in the Stony Plain Reporter once, that it's continues to be placed on the public website, and that again, similar to how we do now, if additional methods are warranted, we can use social media to get additional information out. It's a little bit different in what we're proposing for the location-specific planning bylaws. We have 2 different approach, standard and advanced. Standard take place where there's already a neighborhood plan in effect. So this is a statutory document the council has already approved that shows high-level zoning, location of storm ponds, major roads, that sort of thing. In which case, we would just post a notice sign and post it on the website. For instances where the underlying or overlying neighborhood plan is to be changed in some form or fashion, in addition to this, there would be a mail out to landowners within a 90-meter radius, and I have some examples of this later in the presentation. And please note that, as before, we would continue to refer these things to the Municipal Planning Commission, but again, this is not something specifically in this bylaw. This is something that's already set up through the Planning Advisory Committee bylaw that's already in effect. To kind of show this a little bit more explicitly, we have our common land use planning framework in Stony Plain showing the various levels of planning that takes place. If you notice under the neighborhood design, this is where the advanced ones were. So if we're making changes at that level, this would include not just the website and posting it, but also a mail out to those around. And in a case where the planning is not changing and we're just doing something more at the land development, rezonings in particular, this would be considered a standard approach. And it would just be on the newspaper as well as posted on, or sorry, not on the newspaper, it would be posted on the site as well as posted on the town's website. So we have two examples. This is a greenfield example. The next one will be an infill example. So if you see on the screen here, there's 4 different levels or buffers that we've applied here: 60 meter, 90 meter, 150, and 300. So the red outline area, kind of within the pink color, is the proposed redistricting area. And as indicated, all of the properties that touch the green, the blue, kind of the light blue color, all the properties that are within that radius would receive notice of the through a mail out of the public hearing. In this case, there's about 144 properties that would receive this, and one of the, I guess, the clauses in there just to make sure that we go to kind of the end of the block or whatever a natural barrier would be to ensure instances where neighbors next to each other, one gets it, one doesn't. We want to make sure that we prevent that. So that's a small nuance in terms of the 90 meters to the end of block, I guess is how I like to say it. The next example is an infill property here. This is in the Woodlands neighborhood. You can see the one site, it's just a smaller one here, single rezoning that was proposed at one point. So again, you can see the blue line here captures just a little bit across the highway, all the blocks around it, and again, the intention is that whatever it touches, we would pretty much go to the end of block as a rule. There was some discussion that took place during first reading when this was brought forth several weeks ago. At the time, there were some questions about enforceability. So we've provided this additional slide here in the public hearing presentation. So again, the question that kind of was raised was, what if the developer does not post a sign? Well, ultimately, this is a scenario that is highly unlikely. Again, usually this is brought forth by an applicant who wants to get this approval, so the likelihood of them not following through on a requirement that would have it either postponed or rescheduled is very unlikely. But in that case, again, we would either just move it to a later date or postpone it based on the requirements of the MGA. Because again, if we don't meet that criteria, as per the bylaw, if approved, then we would have to have it re-advertised or reposted sort of thing to make sure it meets that requirements under the bylaw that's before you today. In addition to that, we wanted to emphasize the fact that all notices, whether it's on the website, posted on site, or mail out, needs to be posted 10 days prior to the public hearing or other item that is being presented. And that in regards to kind of a performance, such as when it needs to be removed, location and size, this sort of an aspect is actually something that's better covered under the land use bylaw, and administration is currently undergoing a review of our land use bylaw, just an annual update. So we're intending to bring some changes at that in the Q1 of 2024 that would address some of those more regulatory instances in terms of where the sign could be posted. So basically adding a new sign class for advertisement and then defining some things similar to election signs, I think is a good example. Just some regulations around that to make sure it's done properly. So again, as a quick recap, the proposed process has general statutory advertisement, standard and advanced for location specific. Both location ones include posting on the website and posting a sign on the site. For the advanced, where we're changing the statutory plan, there would also be a mail out to landowners within 90 meters. And for general ones, it would be posted in the newspaper, on the website, and other optional means such as social media are available. Just for context with this one, this was posted in the Stony Plain Reporter on November 24th as well as December 1st. And we're now at the public hearing, second and third readings. And then council can make a decision on this one. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Members of council, we had the first reading, and we just heard some updates in terms of commentary and some kind of remarks from the questions we asked during first reading. Any questions or comments for clarity and understanding? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question on the mail out, and I think administration alluded to this, but just for my own understanding. The 10 days would apply to the mail-outs as well, I think you had mentioned first. And second, when we say 10 days, are we saying postmark 10 days in advance, or would residents expect to receive that in their mailbox 10 days in advance of the public hearing?
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, the intent is that they would be received by the applicants. I'd have to double check with staff, but I believe it's 2 to 3 days is standard mailing practices in terms of how much we would allow time there. So you'd expect the 10 days is when they need to receive it. So whatever that time is, we'd be sending it out before that period.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that question, Councillor Anderson. So for clarity, then I guess the expectation is something to be in the mail 14 days prior, so that there's time for the resident to receive it 10 days prior to the meeting.
Yes, Your Worship, something to that effect. Whatever the regulation, I guess, under the Canada Post requirement to make sure that they receive it by that date is what we'd be using as the additional buffer in addition to the 10 days. So if it's 4 days, then yes, 14 would be the correct answer.
Okay, and then in terms of days, do we count weekends as days? I'm not making sure that somebody does not send it out on Friday and counting Saturday and Sunday as days as well.
Through your worship, we'd be looking at business days in that
Business
case.
days. Thank you for that clarity. Okay, members council, Councillor Hanser, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Dibble. Through you to Mr. Dibble. I'm just curious. I see, I'm going to take you to page 27. That's the Woodlands property that was used as an example. We've got the subject property dead center in the middle of the pink oval. The green circle around is actually a circle. By the time we get to the gold circle, it actually takes on a little bit of an oval site. The blue is more oval and the pink is definitely oval. So I want to ask about that. Is there anything that says that the subject property has to be dead center in the middle? Or would discretion allow planning to pull that set of circles down and around so that the actual homes, the residents in and around that subject property would have more people involved? And I'm not sure what the blue circle is for the mail out, but the blue circle you'll see actually covers a whole big chunk of the 5th Meridian, the street, and the tip of, well, one edge of a residential property across the 5th Meridian, a tiny corner of an institutional property, and a tiny corner of another residential lot. But if that was to be moved to the southeast, let's say, to the to the right and down a bit, the subject property could still be in that pink circle, but it would grab more of the lots that would actually be around that property, most affected by a rezoning of that property. Would it be possible for you to explain why there's not some discretion? Must the properties be dead center in the middle of your identified area? Or can you take into consideration the most number of residents to receive notification who might be affected by that rezoning?
Administration?
Through your worship to Councillor Hanser, I'll do my best to, I think there's a couple questions in there. So to start with, again, the various radiuses here are just examples. Again, this bylaw is showing the blue as the recommendation in the bylaw as proposed before you. In terms of the green looking more like a circle, it's kind of a little bit of optical illusion. Again, the buffer is based on this red outline here. So again, it's much more narrow here and much wider east-west. So it does look more oval-shaped when it's smaller, but as that gets further and further out, it will appear more and more circular in nature. Again, the way the bylaw is very specific here is that it's not up for, in terms of calculating the number of lots that would be automatically part of that mail out, every lot that is touched by the blue would receive a mail out. And in addition to that, say for example, you can see here, there's several lots here. Going north along the highway, we would expect probably to the end of the block there would also receive mail outs. So that way we're ensuring that basically in each direction, any lots that are touched on by that blue to the end of their block would receive a mail out. So again, the numbers here listed here are kind of the minimum amounts. Does that address your question?
Yes, Your Worship, that does.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just, I think the manager did not touch on the dead center of the kind of diagram, and the dead center is where we have to calculate the distance from. So we can't shift it off that dead center because that's where the property is getting rezoned, or so that's where it comes from. I think we have to review, in terms of our bylaw is 60 meters adequate, 90 meters, 150 or 300 meters. Thank you. And Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to administration. Just reading through, appreciate the references that were made in regards to the land use bylaw changes that will be coming regarding the signage. I'm just a little bit challenged on the lack of definition in the bylaw on the signage, and I'm just wondering if you can maybe just shed a little bit more light on it for me, because what I'm seeing right now is in this bylaw, there is no definition of the signage. However, we understand that it will be applicable to the sign standards that are in the land use bylaw. Will the land use bylaw specify a minimum size, or will it only specify a maximum size? Because I'm thinking, and I don't have it pulled up unfortunately, but I'm thinking of what I recall from our land use bylaw, and most of it is a maximum size. Whereas on this type of a bylaw, because this is a sign going on a property, I would anticipate that we would want to see a minimum size and potentially would cap it at a maximum. I don't think we need a massive sign on there, but I'm just looking at the ability to make sure that the information contained on the sign, because it is plentiful as defined through the Act, there's a lot of information that has to go on that sign. I'm just hoping that we have something that's going to prevent, an 8.5 by 11 being placed on the property, something that's actually going to be legible from the street.
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, right now we are working through the details of what those parameters, I guess, would be within the land use bylaw. I would say as a starting point, we have had various signs. I can speak to at least 3 to 5 years that have been posted, not necessarily just for any bylaw, but sometimes where it's required under, say, a municipal reserve land swap or things like that. Environmental reserve often require that to be posted in addition to the requirements of 606. So typically, I believe it's about a 4 by 6 foot board is what's used. Again, that would be what we'd be using kind of as our template going forward. And again, we'll take back some of that comments about minimum size as we look into specific regulations. But again, it needs to meet everything that a notice, just as we put on the website. But again, considering that we're talking about drivers by, walkers by, we do need to be considerate of some of those other dimensions, if that makes sense.
Excellent, thank you, and it does, and that's exactly it. It's the practicality, ensuring that the practicality of the signage, making sure that yes, it does contain everything as required under the Act, but that it is achieving the desired effect, particularly if we are looking at moving to this model, which takes some of what we previously had and no longer does that and moves to this. The 4 by 6 board, essentially, I think the ones that we've seen so far in the community for this type of signage have been maybe even 2 by 2s, 3 by 3s, somewhere around that side. I think they've been very adequate. And I hope that template form stays as something that we recognize as well. The only other question that I had was in relation to any violation on the notice. So in regards to the statutory advertisements, I mean, we as the town send out the mailer, which is great. We as the town would post it on our website, which is great. So the notice sign is really the only provision that is left on the applicant. If there does become a case where the applicant has failed to place the sign on the property within the due time, outside of the typical penalties that they could face if the sign doesn't comply, we then have to delay the public hearing, is what I'm reading in this. If we delay the public hearing, that then would require the town to produce additional mailouts, would it not? Because we would have to advise of the new public hearing date?
Your worship to Councillor Laurie, you would be correct on that aspect. Again, we would have to bring it back to council to request a new date for the public hearing and then repeat all the requirements, so posting it wherever applicable. So ultimately, yes, that would be the case. Again, highly unlikely given the fact that it's the applicant who wants this to go forward. Having worked with some applicants directly, typically they want to have it up almost before first reading because they just want to get it done. But again, that is true.
Okay, let's actually just add to that then, because Councillor Laurie is asking a good line of questioning in terms of that. So if that does happen, I understand that, developers want to get it done, so they've been doing it before first reading. But if they don't get it out within 10 days and we have to delay it, then is there a fee and a penalty because that's costing the town more money? I think that's what we're trying to get at. Like, is there a penalty clause built in there that if we have to do another public hearing and reschedule it, that does cost the taxpayers dollars?
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, or I guess to all of council, at this point in time, there is no additional fee that we have. Again, this is something we would have to look into, and is something I believe we're looking into as we look through the land use bylaw requirements for advertisement signage.
Okay, Councillor Laurie, to add that?
Thank you, Your Worship, and yeah, you took my questioning line there of what I was trying to understand, because the other side of that is, obviously, we have to go through that whole process again. That requires additional administrative work. That requires additional expense at the taxpayers' dollars. And so I'm hopeful that that is something that somewhere in here can be a portion of the consideration on it as we move forward. I just, I want to address, I appreciate that the developer compliance on something like this is high because it's beneficial to the developer. That's fantastic, but I think when we are setting our policies, when we are setting bylaws, we need to make sure that we're setting them broad stroke of all certain possibilities. I mean, I would certainly hope we would get 100% compliance, but if the bylaw doesn't speak to that low percentage, then we also have nothing to go by if we do encounter that low percentage. So I just want to make sure that as these come forward and as we're looking at these, we're considering all potential options, even if the likelihood of that option is relatively minimal. If there are things that should be addressed, they should be addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie, and I appreciate that. So I'll just tag on to that because reading through some of our other bylaws and permit fees, I know there's quite a few of them that have a kind of I guess, a little sidebar on that. Says that if something is started without a permit, like a development permit, then the fee is double the fee. So I think the question, around here is like, is that same clause can be added to this as well, that if somebody does not complete the steps necessary to have the public hearing on the day that needs to be, then the fee is doubled so that we can cover the cost, because I don't think the taxpayer should be on the hook for something that the developer was responsible for.
Through your worship to all of council. Again, it's something we could look into. At this point in time, it is not in place to that effect. Again, we do see this as a very low probability. Again, it's not in their own best interest. But again, it is something we can take under advisement when we look into where that would appropriately be placed. Given that typically this sort of thing may not be within the bylaw itself, it might be something in the fees and charges bylaw. So we would look at that at a later date.
Okay, so that could be added something to the fees and charges, but not. So when the land use bylaw comes into effect, when we review it for the signage sizes, then we can adjust the fees and charges to accommodate this?
Through your worship to all of council, with the manager's response, I just want to add to that. The intent here is to ensure that we're providing clarity to our developing partners on what the town and council expects for notifications. As the manager pointed out, there are a number of good developers who want to comply with this as we go forward. And in fact, the planning development team spent a lot of time talking with these proponents in developing these categories there before council tonight. We did, there are, in addition to us holding the developers accountable, parts of this is how the town will itself follow when it's sending out its own notices. So there are some nuances with respect to the, I guess, the enforcement implications that are being brought forward by the council tonight. We certainly will take those comments aside and review them with the upcoming land use bylaw update and see what we can present to council with respect to in further discussion of that. As of right now, with the bylaw that's before council tonight, those considerations aren't there, but we do hear council and saying we want to have further dialogue on that. It's something that we'll bring forward at a later date.
Okay, thank you, and I look forward to that coming back to council. Councilor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Worship, through to you, to administration. So, touching a little bit more on that, I'm just wondering why that would not be included. I think we include it in most of what we do now. And I get that we're looking for somebody to be in compliance. However, the chances of being in compliance all the time are slim to none. We see on a number of occasions where you can be specific to a specific developer, but we've seen new development come within our community from time to time, and certain things don't fall within that line. So I think what you're hearing from council tonight is, or at least where my thought was with this, is we do need to be very specific with what that cost looks like in addition to. And, so I will be looking forward to when it comes back through the land use bylaw to that being specific to this. So my question really was, why would it not be included?
Go ahead, administration.
Through your worship to Councillor Plechko, one of the interesting things about this bylaw is that it is something that is affecting administration predominantly, whereas the land use bylaw does affect people who put stuff up on their own parcel of land. So one of the things we have looked at and discussed is the fact that in this case, we're almost penalizing ourselves as opposed to the applicant in this case, because this here describes how we do notice or how we require others to do notice. If we're actually enforcing how they do that notice taking place physically on their own land, that would be more applicable under something like the land use bylaw, which again, I do know that when council had mentioned there was a doubling of the fees, that's something specified for building permits when they start ahead of time, and it is something that's established under the fees and charges bylaw. So if we were following a similar approach to that, that would be the proper mechanism for that. If it is a penalty, for example, that might be something we can look into with the land use bylaw. Again, we'll look into this and figure out where it would best be placed, but we'll go from there. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Loynes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification then, seeing as we do have the users' fees and charges bylaws on the agenda, is that something we can add to tonight, or do we have to wait for the land use bylaw first?
Okay, administration.
Through your worship to Councillor Loynes. So just to provide a little bit of clarity, the bylaw before council this evening and at the public hearing is a bylaw that's ultimately regulating the municipality itself and how the municipality provides notice. It's not actually regulating the public. In the bylaw, the town is committing to having a sign placed, which planning has indicated they will adopt into the land use bylaw changes when it comes forward to make that applicable to the public. So I can't speak for my colleagues in planning, but I'm not sure that we've developed what that specific process is, but it is in development for the spring bylaw considerations.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Members of council, any other questions for clear and understanding? Okay, see none, thank you for your presentation. Okay, according to a public hearing, then we would have to go into the applicant, which is ourselves. So, do we need to say anything as an applicant?
No comments, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on with our next phase of our public hearing, then this is the time that we allow all those that are in favor of the proposed bylaw change can come forward and speak now. Administration, has anybody registered to speak in favor?
Through your worship, no one has registered to speak in favor.
Okay. Anybody in the chambers like to speak in favor of the proposed bylaw change? Okay, see none. We'll move on to the next phase, which is then all those that are not in favor of the bylaw proposal change. Administration, has anybody registered to speak?
Through your worship, yes, there has been one registered speaker for this evening. Sorry. We have Mr. I've lost it. I apologize. We have Mr. Dennis Merrill with the Alberta Weekly Newspaper Association.
Okay, so welcome to chambers, sir. Please come up to the front. I believe there's a sign-up sheet, if you can do that, and then you'll have to just push the mic to turn it on and just speak directly into the mic.
Thank you, Mayor Choi and councillors and administration. My name is Dennis Merrill, as you just heard. I've served as the executive director of the Alberta Weekly Newspapers Association, which is a trade association representing 76 community weeklies for the past 41 years. And I'm here, obviously, to represent the Stony Plain Reporter, which serves your town. Combined, the members of the AWNA distribute just under 500,000 copies per week to residents outside of Alberta's major centres. Our association furthers the interests of its membership in three main areas: advocacy, education, and advertising promotion. And I'm here today to speak in support of public notice advertising in the local newspaper of record, and as you've heard, which is the Stony Plain Reporter, and as you've heard, I'm speaking actually against the bylaw. I'd also like to speak out in favor of the town amplifying its message by using other means of advertising, which you've heard. We would argue that advertising in multiple media channels is always better. Our main concern, though, is that public notice continue to be placed in the local newspaper, and while we appreciate that Stony Plain's proposed ad bylaw still includes at least one notice in the local newspaper of record, along with the other methods mentioned, such as the town's website, signage, notices delivered door to door, which is great, but I believe adding a second notice in the paper, as has been the previous practice, would be a small price to pay to ensure all citizens are informed and would deliver the message that your administration is fully open and transparent. I'd just like to say readership of community newspapers in Alberta remains strong. An Alberta research study commissioned in 2020 by our partners at Canada Media shows that nearly 80% of respondents in households and communities under 100,000 that receive a community newspaper reported having read it in the last week. By a wide margin, community newspapers are the preferred platform to receive information on local government services and programs. Ads in printed local community newspapers were more than twice as likely to inspire action than social media or ads placed on random websites. We've left behind, or can leave behind, a copy of the study if you wish. Just like to conclude by saying global digital platforms have had a devastating impact on traditional media. I'm sure you've heard lots in the media about Bill C-18, which proposes to redistribute some of the revenue that tech platforms like Google have generated to newspapers. But it's more reason why we believe local governments have a significant role to play in preserving local journalism. It's not too much of a stretch to say that your support of the local paper is important to preserving democracy. Please help support civic journalism in your community. Now is not the time for the town to reduce its spending in local media. We hope that you continue to make the Stony Plain Reporter a part of your town's communication strategy in the future. Thank you. That's all I have to say, but certainly if there are questions, I can stick around for a minute or two to hear those, and I will complete this for you. But feel free to throw any questions at me if you have any. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Myrtle. Definitely appreciate those insights and those stats that you provided. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Hansard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is your last name Moros?
Merrill.
Merrill.
Yes.
Mr. Merrill, thank you very much for your perspective on print advertising. I spent 8 years of my life selling print advertising for a national news magazine. And I just want to say that I've always had a deep respect for print advertising. I'm in a line of business now, which I don't need to advertise here. Most everybody knows what that is. But generally speaking, many people in my industry have tailored back on their print advertising because they don't believe that they get as good a coverage, as consistent coverage. What I'm curious about is you used a number at the very beginning of your presentation that the papers, the whole family of papers that you oversee, have 500,000 in distribution. But within the town of Stony Plain limits, I know that there have been ongoing problems with keeping consistent carriers, having the papers delivered to all residents. That certainly is not happening. And I know that we have had some periods of time, I was one, where when I would take my recycling out, I would fish a whole stack of Stony Plain Reporters out of my garbage can and put them into my recycling because some carriers or the people who supply the papers to the carriers would actually shortchange the people waiting for their paper and dispose of them in trash cans. Being a recycler myself, I at least put them in the recycling. But what I'm concerned about is the reduced effect of print advertising to actually get into the hands of the people who need to know the information. And if there's been anything done by your industry to ensure that those papers are actually delivered to every household. And if you would give us some stats, perhaps, this evening on how many households in Stony Plain actually receive a paper, it would help me to understand your point of view about the importance of print advertising for keeping all of our residents, all within quotes, our residents informed. The other piece that I wonder if you could speak to is, given that so many people now are looking online for everything, from real estate to what they want to buy, and the need for print advertising grows less and less. Although I will say there are many people, in fact, a couple of past councilors on Stony Plain Council who no longer sit here, who avidly read their paper from front to back, everything, obituaries, every ad, every news article. Could you please help us to understand why print advertising in the form of the Stony Plain Reporter is relevant for us to get this information into the hands of our people who need to know the information that we now put online in a great way?
Well, I guess I'd respond to that by saying that, you know, certainly, yeah, I believe that newspapers like the Stony Plain Reporter do have to complement by having some kind of an online presence as well. And I guess what I would say is that as a council, if you're, you know, charged with ensuring that folks see the statutory advertisements that we're talking about here, I agree that print is not really the only method that you need to be using. But at least with Stony Plain Reporter or with any community newspaper for that matter, it is a third party that is really conveying that information over and above what the town itself is doing. I appreciate that, yes, you can use your website and you can put signs up, but you want to ensure that as many residents as possible see the notice. And even though it's probably true that, you know, the readership of the print paper possibly has declined, and I don't know all the individual, what you're saying about what's happening specifically in Stony Plain, I would certainly need to check with our Ad Canada partners that are conducting surveys on a regular basis in terms of what the current readership is. But I would still submit that you still want to consider complementing other methods that you use and not overlook entirely using the paper. And just on the grounds that people aren't reading anymore, I really would counter again that, you know, our residents that say aren't necessarily using social media, or they're not even necessarily finding the information on the Town of Stony Plain's website. But yeah, maybe they are looking at the newspaper and reading it, so perhaps you can catch that individual that way. I'm just saying that it still behooves the town to consider continuing to use the paper and running those ads in the paper in addition to the other methods that you really need to look at to ensure that as many folks as possible see that notice. That's what I would counter with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hansford, follow up?
Supplemental reiteration of my question. Do you have any idea how many routes are unserviced in the town of Stony Plain, leaving residents not receiving their paper?
Well, I would have to check with the Post Media folks and get that information from them, but the answer is no, I don't have that information at my fingertips at this time, Councillor Hansard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Merrill, for being here and presenting to us this evening. Your presentation actually reminds me of a conversation I had during our light up just down the street last week, where I chatted with a resident about some things that were going on in the municipality and had mentioned the availability on our website. And both the lady I was speaking to and her husband looked at me and said, well, we don't do that. You know, we get our information from the paper. And so I certainly appreciate that there's a segment of our community that still relies on print media for information. I don't know if this is a question that you can answer or maybe administration, but when I look in our package page, my apologies, I switched screens here, 14, it looks to be a little bit smaller than maybe a quarter page advertisement. What does that cost the municipality to print that in the weekly paper?
A quarter page ad in the Stony Plain Reporter? I don't have an exact number, but I would think that, you know, it would probably be somewhere in the vicinity of $300-400 or thereabouts. I would have to check, though.
Okay,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm through you, Mr. Mayor. Does administration have an indication as to the cost of an ad?
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, I would agree with the individual here that it is about in that kind of $300 to $400 or $500. Again, it depends exactly how big the map is and a few things like that in terms of that, but that's within the ballpark of the right amount.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Perfect. And no, I appreciate that. I do have a second question, and this I'll direct through you, Mr. Mayor, to administration. But with the notices that go out through our website, please correct me if I'm wrong, is there a subscribe button for these public hearing notices specifically, or do residents have to navigate to a specific page on our website to see?
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, each of their web pages do have a subscribe button. So in this case, there is a specific, I believe it's a newsfeed page for public hearings. So you would have the ability to subscribe directly for all public hearings if desired.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you again for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, my question is being answered.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laurie, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Merrill, for coming to speak this evening. Question for you. You did recognize that the statutory advertisements that we're proposing here, it's just a reduction from 2 weeks of advertisement to 1 week of advertisement. You know, that is still being advertised in the paper. It's still reaching the readership of the paper. I'm just curious if I can get a little bit more of your thoughts around that change from 2 weeks to 1 week. If we are still advertising it in the paper, but we're just, again, refining the process based on timelines, et cetera, to only require to do that once, do you have any comment on that specifically?
Well, first of all, I congratulate you for, in fact, doing that, because as you've seen on some of the slides earlier, some municipalities have cut out the newspaper entirely, and I think that's short-sighted. But the fact that you're looking at still continuing to do it once a week is great. I mean, we certainly do appreciate that. I guess the other thing that I would add, like the creation of these bylaws, like, is probably, I don't think it's actually necessary in terms of the town council can decide to do whatever it wants to do as far as it can continue to run those ads twice a week, but can do anything else in terms of town website, signage, delivering door to door. I don't think there's anything preventing it from doing all of those other things. So, I mean, prescribing once, one-time advertising instead of two, I mean, I guess I would just come back with the optics of that. It still looks to me like you're changing something that's already by statute required to be done twice in the newspaper. Now you're prescribing it to only be done once. What message does that send to people that live in Stony Plain? Like, you used to at least give us a couple of shots at this, now you're only doing it once. So I guess I would argue that in the interests of, that openness and transparency, why not just continue to do it twice? You don't need to just prescribe to only do it once. You can do whatever you want. So that's all I would suggest. I'm happy to see that you're still keeping the newspaper in the mix, but it's still, at the end of the day, I mean, we're faced, or have been faced with lots of closures over the last few years. Every little bit of lost ad revenue for the newspaper is just kind of another nail in its coffin, so to speak. And I would say that if the local town council's not supporting that paper, who is going to support it? And it needs that support in order to continue putting articles in that newspaper and reporting on what's going on. And so we would ask that you still consider to do it twice, but again, certainly recognize and appreciate that you're at least specifying that you're going to continue to do it once, and that's more than some towns in this area have even done. So that's a good thing for sure.
Thank you. And Your Worship, if I may, another question?
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. And this one would be through you to administration. The town currently still, I believe rents ad space in the paper for our events calendar. And on the events calendar, we do list our council meetings. So when we're looking at the current bylaw speaks to how we must meet the act as the MGA. but is there an opportunity on our events calendar where it would say, you know, December 11th council meeting? Would there be an opportunity to add text to that to say, you know, December 11th council meeting, public hearing, statutory public hearing for bylaw 2681/G/23. So that way we have the primary notice that gets posted in the paper as its separate entity, but then we make sure that any time throughout the process that is still recognized on our events calendar, that public hearing is upcoming?
Administration?
Your worship, I could certainly make a couple comments there, and if any member of staff that's maybe more directly involved with that wishes to add, that'd be good too. I think you know, if the question is, can that be done? I mean, answer is probably yes, it could be done. But I don't know that I want to indicate that, you know, the process we're discussing now is the specific statutory process. You know, as it relates to what goes into those things, that, you know, I mean, changes different times. Sometimes, you know, things can be added, things are taken away, so on and so forth. So is the answer, can it be done? Yes. Is the answer, will it or should it be done? Honestly, I don't know I can provide that answer at this point.
Excellent, thank you very much, and I appreciate that answer, and I think I agree. There's different things between what we're discussing in relation to the statutory bylaw, and then there's different ways that we can continue to communicate with our public, and so I appreciate that clarity from administration, and again, that's just something I think we can pin as a conversation as we go forward, so appreciate it, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Loynes, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate you being here. You did touch on a couple of the things I was going to ask. So just to make it as black and white as possible, we hear when we have public hearings, a lot of the times, those that are coming in either to speak for or against, say they didn't even see it in the paper to begin with. So my concern is we're spending $300 to $500 and they're still missing it. And you're saying that realistically, your personal concern is the loss of revenue if the town pulls out? That's the question.
Well, I mean, that is a personal concern, but I would say the overriding concern is still, you know, that whole openness and transparency. If you really, truly want as many folks as possible to see that you're advertising this public statute, then wouldn't it behoove you to look at all avenues as opposed to, well, should we drop advertising in the newspaper because we believe that fewer folks are going to see that ad? I mean, or should we continue to do it in the newspaper and supplement it with other means? And I appreciate that more folks are looking online and using their mobile devices, and you have to be there too. And it's gotten more complicated to communicate in this day and age, for sure. But you know, it would be a sad day for me and a lot of folks if newspapers just disappeared entirely. And that's because, unfortunately for them, for the Stony Plain Reporters of the world, just moving everything online, there's just not a revenue model to support that long term. So they need to be online, but they need to also have that printed newspaper. And yeah, they still need to do a good job to ensure folks read that newspaper, and that's important too. But, you know, I would argue that some, as Councillor Anderson pointed out, are still actually reading the paper. So you're getting to some folks. So I just think I think you just have to cover all the bases, and that's what I'm arguing. Okay. Thank you.
And again, we are, through you, sorry, Your Worship, to administration, we are covering our bases by advertising just once.
Yeah. Your Worship, to Councillor Loynes, yes, that is correct. We are covering our bases by ensuring that it's at least once in the newspaper.
Thank you, that's all then.
Okay. Any more questions for clear understanding? Okay. Councillor Hansford, go ahead.
Mr. Merrill, I believe the Stony Plain Reporter used to also have a digital presence. Do you still? Is the newspaper online?
I believe it's still online, but again, how well they're maintaining that. I mean, individual newspapers, I don't profess to keep on top of every single newspaper in terms of how many folks are looking at them online. So I need to check a little bit more into that for you.
In that case, Mr. Mayor, I'm not worried about how many people are looking at it. That's the responsibility of people who are seeking information.
Yeah.
What I'm looking at is what is made available. And if the Stony Plain Reporter is also having a digital presence, people are able to see what's in the paper online, and then we cover off the base that they don't have to dig through a paper. They can actually go online. So I certainly appreciate that you have a concern about the life of the newspaper. Council doesn't make these decisions ultimately. We make an overall decision to support this bylaw change or not. But it's up to administration. We don't get into the daily work of administration. Why this is coming to council is because we have to follow the laws, the requirements of the Municipal Government Act, et cetera, for how we advertise public hearings. So our responsibility is to our taxpayers and residents. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions for clear understanding? Okay. Thank you for members of council for the questions, and thank you for the presentation. I just have one question for you that has not been covered. Is in terms of readership in the town of Stony Plain, do you have any data of what the reader percentage is, the readership?
I do, and I actually have a study that I can leave with you if you like.
Okay, that was one that you referenced earlier through the power of printed newspaper?
Would it be all right if I just left that with you?
Yeah, you can
or-
leave it out.
Yeah,
And we can also
sure,
get the
sure.
website,
Okay,
also can send it out.
yeah, okay.
Okay, because I think I appreciate where this commentary is coming from, and I do remember when the MJ was altered, there was a big push from print media to make sure that there was still a section that required municipalities to advertise in print media. Obviously, that didn't succeed because, as you mentioned, there's many municipalities around Stony Plain that do not advertise in print media. And I think one of the reasons that I've noticed just talking to the regional mayors is that the readership is down. The consistency of delivery is not there. So in terms of advertising in the paper, there are the segment that does continue to read that, and I'm one of those segments as well. I get the paper every Friday, but yet my brother, who just lives in the next subdivision, does not get it on a weekly basis. Right? But we all have access to social media and other platforms. And I think the bridge here, I think, was not to cut out print media, was we understand that where residents are getting information is starting to change. So we're starting to address that, make sure that we hit all the media channels possible to get to as many residents as possible. And this might be a happy medium, this may not be a happy medium. So we're just trying to find that out, and definitely appreciate your commentary and Shane sharing with us that there is quite a few people that still do read print media.
Well, thank you, Mayor Choi, and thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak and for the questions, and I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. And I'll send the study by email if that's okay, but I can leave a hard copy as well.
Yeah, just leave the hard copy, and then our staff will forward
sure.
that to
I'll just
the
leave that
website.
here then. And, yeah, perfect. And thanks again.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Okay, administration, has anybody else registered to speak in opposed to opposition of the bylaw change?
Through your worship, no, there has not been.
Okay. So I'll go to the floor. Has anybody in the gallery like to speak in opposition of the proposed bylaw changes? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our next phase of the public hearing. So all those that have a general comment about the proposed bylaw change. Administration, has anybody registered?
Through your worship, no, there hasn't.
Thank you. Does anybody in the gallery like to speak, general comment about the proposed bylaw change? Okay, seeing none. Administration, any final comments as the applicant?
No, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then over to our legislative services, according to section 216.4 and 6006.1, have a follow the rules and requirements for hosting a public hearing.
Through Your Worship, yes, we have.
Okay. With that, then I'll declare bylaw 2681G/23 public hearing for the public hearing for the public advertising bylaw closed, and we'll be doing that later in the business items under number 8 of our agenda. Thank you. Right. Okay, council, looking at our agenda, moving to number 6, which is the adoption of the regular council meeting minutes from November 27th. Councilor Loynes.
The town council adopt the November 27th, 2023 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, members of council, you had the opportunity to read it. Any errors or omissions on those minutes? Okay, I do not see any either, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Okay, moving on to number 7, which is council boards and committee minutes. Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the town council receive the council board and committee minutes for information.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, it is the 7.1, the Trans-Alto Tri-Leisure Center board meeting for October 19th. Any questions regarding those minutes? Okay, go ahead, Councilor Pleshko.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, through you, Mayor Choi, to the representative of the Tri, is it normal practice to move in and out of camera a couple of times?
Okay. The representative that was there was Councilor Hansard. That is a question specific to the board itself. I know from experience, council has the opportunity to move in and out of camera when it's required, and that can happen at different times throughout the meeting. Our own council has done that quite a few times after the audit and finance presentation by the auditor. We've gone into closed session, had the conversation with the auditors, and then we came out of closed session. And then if we need a closed session at the end of the meeting, which we had the opportunity as well, so yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on to number 8, bylaws. Let's take a 10-minute recess and we'll come back and we'll deal with 8.1. Thank you. All right, welcome back, members of council, administration, and those that are participating in the gallery and then watching through social media channels. Continuing on with our agenda, moving on to number 8. And 8.1 is the public advertising bylaw, which has had a public hearing on that, and now we're going to deal with that as a business item. Administration, anything to touch on before we move on?
No, Your Worship, but we are here if there's any questions or comments or any further needs from administration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Some members of council, we've had the opportunity to read the agenda. This is our second reading, as we did the first reading a couple weeks ago. We provided some commentary to the questions that we asked. And we also had a public hearing where we allowed members of the public to address certain issues on that. Now it's up for us to have any questions and debate. Since there was no presentation from administration this time, is there any more questions for clarity before I entertain the second motion? Okay, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to ask everyone to turn to page 26 of our agenda package. Just looking at the map, that shows kind of a larger area there with some approximate mail out graphed over top of that. My question related to this one is looking at sort of the requirements for the proposed changes with the notice sign and so on. This is a large area. Where would that notice sign go, and would it be restricted to a single sign?
Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, we generally work with the applicant to ensure that it's at a very prominent location. So the example we would have here is, given that the largest or most major road is Highway 779, and that most people would be accessing this probably at the corner of what is West Terra Drive, which is on the north side of the red outlined area, would probably be posted right at the corner of that intersection.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Was there any consideration given when we're looking at a larger piece of land to having additional signage? Or were we just strictly looking at one notice board?
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, it's a little bit of a tough conversation. Generally, this sort of thing isn't an issue. If it was, it is something that we may work with the applicant to see if there was an instance that would have two postings. But again, I'm trying to think back to the ones that I've been involved with, and predominantly there's one major access road or an intersection that would be the predominant way or means by which most either vehicular or pedestrians would be going by a site. Again, our road network is primarily kind of a tertiary, sort of a high-level primary and then tertiary, so it's generally on either the arterial road or the intersection of that with another arterial or collector roads.
Thank you. Unrelated, I do have a second question, if I may. We heard earlier this evening that there was an approximate cost between $300 and $500 for a single newspaper ad. Just looking maybe for a cost to the town on an annual basis, what maybe we've had to pay over the last year for those ads to run within the newspaper. An approximation is fine. I don't need exact numbers, but just looking for a ballpark figure.
Okay.
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, it's somewhat tough to gauge. Again, different years we have different number of advertisements for needs for bylaws. Again, I've been with the town for about 11, 12 years now. I've seen some years where we have 2 or 3 applications, so we're looking at probably less than $1,000 in total. Other years where we might have say upwards of 10 bylaws, so you might be pushing $3,000 to $5,000. If I was to put a ballpark on it, I would say $500 to $5,000 would be a reasonable estimate.
Okay. For sure, and I appreciate that, looking, in 4 figures, not, 5 or considerably more, right? We're looking at, a small number, relatively speaking, that may engage a segment of our population that might not receive that information otherwise. So I appreciate the commentary there. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious if administration could bring up that page 26, because I'm just looking for some clarity. In the presentation, we talked about natural barriers and whatnot. So I'm just for clarity, if I could get it up, I'd like to use my laser pointer here and ask my question. Okay, so from what I understand, looking over here, from what I understand is if for example, the blue touches this block, everybody on this block will get it, a mail out. So would that be like everybody on this block? Like what are we calling that? And this natural barrier, because it quite extends the potential people who would be getting a mail out.
Through your worship, I might select this area over here, just kind of give an example. So if you notice, the blue area just touches the back of these lots here. So again, all of those lots would be included. If we go across here, the blue does touch some of these, so we would probably go to the end here. Again, the blue does touch some of these. It does not touch these, so we'd probably go to the end. Again, there's kind of a natural barrier right there. So that's what we mean by kind of the end of the block, is wherever there's a natural break is where we'd be looking there to make sure that it goes to that natural break.
Okay, so then through you to administration, back to my example, this street here. That's behind us. Oh, sorry, here. This street here. There is no natural barrier along the way, and so that's my question. Would we then mail out to everyone on that street?
This one is a little bit of a unique situation. We would likely go until a break, and again, I believe there might be a little PUL break here, something like that, but again, it would be to the end of the block or the natural break there. So again, if there's a break such as this here, there's a little walkway there, those would be kind of those natural breaks we talk about in the bylaw that we would go up until to ensure that everyone kind of along that block or that portion of the block would be receiving notice of the public advertisement.
Sorry, and just for, again, for clarification, and I realize this is just one example, so it's not always going to be the same, but for example, this block here, we would say natural barrier, probably over here somewheres, so all these residents would then potentially get a mail out?
Through your worship to council or to the deputy mayor, that is correct.
Okay, I think I have a fairly good understanding of it.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions for clear understanding? Okay, see none. Councilor Pletchko for second reading, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council gives second reading to Public Advertisement Bylaw 2681/G/23 as amended.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, questions for clarity, understanding, and debate on the motion on the floor. Go ahead, Councilor Loyens.
What was amended?
There's nothing amended.
Through your worship to Councillor Loyens, the bylaw was amended since first reading with just the few minor changes that were included in the track changes version on your agenda today.
Right, but nothing substantial in terms of, okay. Because there is an amendment motion that if council wants to increase the size, that's not included. No. Okay. Okay, Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did bring up some concerns earlier, but I'm quite happy with the responses that I've received in relation to those. I think we do need to consider the minimum sign sizing. We need to consider whether there are appropriate penalties that may need to be applied on this. But given that we will see the land use bylaw coming forward that will present some of that, and given that this bylaw is proposed to have a review within 1 year, I think it's safe to say that the way this is written gives us a good opportunity to implement it and start seeing how it works and understanding. The only comment I would make is, I'm not necessarily in favor of the continual, as we heard earlier, in opposition of that additional advertising. I think it was something recognized from the development community as a little bit onerous and slowed us down in permit issuing and that. But I do think we have an opportunity in that we already have an events calendar in the newspaper that occurs in there regularly. And that does state when our council meeting is, and it's just a very simple text format. And so if administration could take that into consideration, if there is going to be a statutory public hearing and a meeting, if that could just be noted along with that council meeting date, I think that, again, covers off that base of just providing that extra touch point to our residents of making sure that, if they are looking through the paper, if we do have those hearings come up, that they are aware of them. It might mean they have to go look for a little bit of additional information elsewhere, but as long as we've met the requirements of the Act and the MGA by advertising the one time with the significant ad, and then if we have this as that additional information, I think that's due diligence, and I think it's doing a fairness to our residents in making sure that they have an understanding and access to that information as reasonable.
Thank you for your comments there, and I like that line of thinking, but I just wanted to add something else here because I think we had a presentation, the differentiation between advanced and standard, and I think I believe it was Councillor Anderson that asked the question about in terms of news releases and emails going out, and I think the question was, who can sign up for it, and anybody can sign up for it. But in terms of different levels of advertising we want to do, in terms of advanced, because there is no design yet, and we want to reach more residents, is that possible to have that included that when we do an advanced neighborhood design, so something that's not been approved by council yet, it automatically goes out in the news feed? So if there's a public hearing for that, then now nobody has to design or subscribe because it's more advanced, that instead of just having that, every resident that signs up for the news feeds gets it.
Your worship, again, as I think earlier noted by administration, it is something that we can do. Again, we can look into how to arrange that administratively.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that, and definitely because where you have separated between standard and advanced are very easy to understand, but definitely when we're looking at an advanced neighborhood, when there has not been an approved subdivision or land use, then we should actually get out to as many people as possible, and sending out as an email to everybody that subscribes to the Town of Stony Plain would actually give us that more of a, I guess, invested individuals that are willing to read that and understand what's going on instead of a blanket advertisement in the reporter. Okay, any more? Councillor Hansard?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I really appreciate that we had Mr. Merrill show up this evening to stand up for community newspapers. I was a little concerned that we didn't really get answers as to how many routes are left unserviced in Stony Plain and that type of thing, because I don't think if one person can be all-knowing about every aspect of a newspaper, but I would expect that we would have some information be available so that we can make intelligent decisions. I also appreciated that we had an opportunity to explain that our business is not about saving the newspaper. Our business is about informing our residents, our taxpayers. And also, I know that if you are happy with the results that you've been getting on something, you can continue to do things exactly the way you've been doing them always, and sometimes forever. Now that the Municipal Government Act has loosened the way we look at advertising for these matters, I think it's important that we try them. And we are beholden to our taxpayers. I don't see us spending the money that we've been spending and add more things when we have the privilege of being able to juggle things around and try something new. And I do believe it is our responsibility as councilors to support trying something new. I appreciate that our administration came to us with an idea on how we might do things differently and be more responsible and responsive to our residents and getting the information to them so that they know what's going on and they can make intelligent decisions about influencing council and administration to give them what they need so that they are informed. I fully support that we are trying something different. I do support that we continue for a time doing the single advertising on these matters, considering that in the past, Stony Plain has been one of the largest contributors of dollars spent on our local newspaper in advertising, and I, for one, as a councillor, have not always felt that we've had a fair representation in the newspaper when it comes to matters that are going on in Stony Plain. However, I am supportive of our local newspaper, and therefore I fully support that we would continue with single advertisement in print media for our public hearings and matters that come out of planning and infrastructure. Perhaps we'll see some improvements. Perhaps the paper will hear some of what we said this evening and take steps to make things better so that these newspapers actually do reach people. And perhaps my viewpoint in the future will change. For now, I'm happy to support this information, this bylaw that has been brought to us by administration as it is currently written.
Thank you, Councilor Hansard. Any other questions, comments? I do have a question for administration. In terms of the one newspaper advertisement, is there a time frame for that prior to the public hearing? So would that be 2 weeks prior, 3 weeks prior, a month prior?
Through your worship to all of council, again, this falls with all notices. It would have to be posted 10 days prior to the public hearing being held.
Okay, so 10 days prior to that, that means it would be, being weekly, we would have it the week before the public hearing then? Or
At least, yes. Yeah, no, exactly. I think it would follow very common where after first reading would be in the newspaper kind of that week or the week right after in terms of timing.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more questions, comments, debate? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your second chance here to ask a question. Just in terms of the release that goes out on our website in comparison to the newspaper advertisement, is there extra work required of our staff to format that, to modify that, or are we looking at a very similar advertisement just being posted in two separate places?
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, it's a very similar process. Typically, I believe staff would actually draft one and then copy and paste the information to the other. Again, one is being posted kind of behind the scenes in the format of the website, and the other one is going within the format required by the newspaper. So again, same content, margins and whatnot may change here and there, but exactly the same content.
Thank you for that. Struggling a little bit, just in part based on some of the conversations I've had with residents around town, even going back to the election. And when the municipal election happened, had the privilege of talking to a number of residents who communicated that a lot of what they learned about candidates in that election, they learned through the local paper. And that they, were able to sit down with a coffee and kind of read through, I think the newspaper had asked 3 questions of all candidates, and they found that to be very, very helpful. I've continued to hear from many within our community the challenges experienced with technology. And typically there's a demographic of our municipality that I hear that from, and we certainly are growing up in an information age where many of us are considered digital natives, but we also have a segment of our population that doesn't necessarily have the same access to or skills with technology. And so, I don't believe that everything that we do needs to necessarily be in the paper, but, when they are things that affect our municipality on a little bit of a larger scale, I think it's advantageous for us to do our due diligence to reach as many people as we can. I appreciate that we still see that within this bylaw for those general statutory advertisements. But I'm just wondering around the advanced process, if there's a place there for those advertisements. And the reason that I choose that one as opposed to standard is because it affects, when we're looking at that neighborhood level, a greater number of people. I know I've been at a couple of events within the municipality where we've heard from, individuals where we've done sort of not a public hearing, but a gathering or information session and that sort of thing. And sometimes we wonder, we're only hearing from people that are, directly affected. And we've often asked, or I've heard conversation as to why that is and what we can do to broaden that to hear from others within our municipality that maybe aren't directly affected in terms of being next door neighbors, but have a vested interest in what's happening within the municipality. And so, as much as I think those notice signs are brilliant, I actually happened to see a couple of them in Toronto when we were there for FCM and thought it was a great tool, and I love that that's included here. But I do think, there is a place for those newspaper advertisements, under advance. Now, I don't know process-wise if I'm allowed to make that as a motion to amend or what that might look like. And I'm not sure that there's necessarily appetite from my colleagues for that specifically. You know, I think we've heard this is coming back within the year or right around a year, and certainly another chance to take a look at it. But maybe to administration or to you, Mr. Mayor, is that a motion that I can put forward to add one newspaper advertisement to the advanced process here?
I think there is already one advertisement for the advanced.
Not in the newspaper, just for general statutory.
Again, it could be brought forward as a motion. Again, the newspaper advertisement applies to the general one, not the standard or the advanced. So yes, it could be added to the advanced if council so wished via a motion.
Okay, so thank you. So, yes, so Councilor Anderson, if that's what you'd like to add, is you can say, you can make an amendment to add one newspaper advertising notice to the advanced application process.
And I so move. I don't know, do I need to word that individually, or can we go with it as you put forward?
Yeah, so I think they will continue to monitor that. So I think the motion is to amend the bylaw to add one newspaper advertisement to the advanced application process.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, with that, while staff is getting that typed out, I'll open the floor for debate and comments on the amendment. Councillor Hansard.
I need clarification. Sorry, part of what Councillor Anderson was saying was lost for me. I think it's because he turns his head to look at you or whatever, and then his voice trails off. So exactly what would this amendment do? How would this make this motion for this bylaw to be passed better?
Okay, I'll actually ask council to turn to page 24 of 127. That's probably where the easiest visual for council is in terms of the requirements for location-specific bylaw changes. So there's a tiered approach for applications. If it's a standard approach, those are the notices that you need: notice sign, a website post. And then for the advance, which Councillor Anderson is talking about, is there's a notice sign, there's a website, there's mail out for 90 meters, but he also like to add an advertisement in the newspaper.
Okay. If I may ask another question pertinent to that. Your Worship, does this in any way slow this down so that this does not come into effect as soon as intended by administration and council up to this point? Do we have to go back to the public and now advertise this again?
No, we do not.
Okay.
So it's just an amendment to add an additional point to add to the advance application.
And that is going to help us in what way?
I think as mentioned by Councillor Anderson, not everybody is on social media or tech savvy. This is to ensure that, that we're trying to reach out as many residents as possible, and there are a segment of our population that still reads print media, and having that is an additional service if council wants.
Your Worship, if I may, we do have a motion drafted here, I believe. Just want to clarify with Your Worship as Chair that that motion's been accepted, or the amended motion has been accepted?
Yes, yes. I think it was worded, and then I think Councillor Anderson nodded when I kind of read it out. That was his intent.
So, Your Worship, maybe just for clarification, you can see we actually have the motion amended or worded as such to put an addition in letter D under clause 3.4.2.
Okay, thank you.
That's where it lists off what would be required for advanced.
Okay, I'll let Councilor Anderson look at that. Any more debate or commentary on the motion to add that? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and appreciate Councillor Anderson bringing this forward as a topic of debate for us to discuss here. As we went through this process, it kind of has opened my eyes on, the different avenues in which things come forward and who is impacted, who isn't impacted, what's relevant, what isn't relevant, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's important to note that no matter what, everybody's opinion at one place or time or another is relevant, and everybody should be afforded an opportunity. But I think when we're dealing with location-specific items, there's a level, I guess you would call it, of, whose voices stand where. And with location-specific issues, those immediately impacted in that location are certainly the ones that we want to hear from. And we're doing so in the advanced by providing the mailouts. And the mailouts, in my opinion, would be much more effective and efficient than newspaper advertising. And I understand that this is not asking us to remove the mailouts, but that to me is why this is in here, is to make sure that we are directly communicating with those who are most likely to be impacted. I struggle with this one because the premise around putting this in the newspaper would be to give a broader audience for a location-specific planning bylaw. And I'm not sure if I really would agree or feel that somebody in the complete opposite side of the municipality would truly be impacted enough by a location-specific planning bylaw that that level of engagement is needed. And I'm not necessarily sure that there would be much relevant information that would come forward from somebody else in there. And it kind of speaks to, do we even need the website post in that? I mean, the notice sign was very specific. Those who are in the general area, those who travel that road, those who might be impacted that might be outside the 90-meter radius, that's a really good indicator to them that, hey, there's something changing here and you may want to pay attention. The website, I think, is kind of our catch-all, where it's, if somebody happened to come across it and had that, they could. But I don't know that I see enough reason. While I appreciate the premise, I don't know that I see enough reason to add this in to a location-specific item. I fully support it in our statutory items because those tend to impact everybody in the town. And therefore, we want to make sure we're catching as many people as possible in all of the town. I think this might just add some complication if somebody is seeing this in a newspaper and they may be looking into it and coming to chambers to understand how it impacts them, when reality is it may not be relevant. So I don't believe I'll be supporting this amendment, but definitely open to hearing the opinions of my colleagues on council and how they perceive this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Laurie. Any more questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Councillor Hansard, go again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate Councillor Laurie's comments. As he was speaking, I'm reminded of any number of council meetings when we had bylaw changes, zoning issues, and whatever being considered by council, that people not from the neighborhoods being affected. In a couple of cases, people from the city of Spruce Grove came over and they rendered their opinion. And I think sometimes what happens when you do a blanket advertisement specifically for an area-specific matter, you do invite that. You invite people who kind of want to exercise their public speaking skills, come into council chambers and try to affect something, and it really does bog down the process and create problems. I just think that we've done a pretty good job, and I think we've taken steps in this change to do a better job at communicating with people and creating new ways that we can communicate with people. But I don't know that blanket invitations for area-specific bylaw changes are helpful in this process. If someone feels that they want to speak but doesn't have the ability, they can always call on a friend or someone to speak on their behalf, perhaps a neighbor, and that often happens, where one person in a neighborhood stands up to speak for many. So unless the wisdom of my colleagues on council persuade me otherwise, I'm not likely to support this motion at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Hansard. Councilor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through to administration and council. When I read through this, I thought our administration had done a really good job of doing their job and deciding where things should be done. This advanced area is specific to a region in our community that is specific to individuals. And as Councillor Laurie and Councillor Hansard have said, this needs to stay within that region. We see far too often in our social media, when we blanket things, it becomes a bit of a disaster within our community. And I think when we're looking to try and keep things in our community to specific regions, administration has done a really good job. This does come back once a year, am I correct in that, Miles? Yeah, so I see the nod, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to allow our administration to move forward with a good plan, I think, for our community into certain areas. It also gives us a year's time to see whether or not we need to add to it. You know, so I think there's good opportunity for both. I don't think it's something that we need to do every time that something comes to us. We all get caught up in what we think administratively should be in place. But I did think that this was well laid out for us to move forward with. So unless the wisdom of council can show me different, I can't support this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And if you can turn off your mics, please. Thank you. And Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and very good discussion this evening. I'd just like to start by acknowledging I am following the argument in terms of the idea of an advanced area-specific outreach for intake. So I'm not, what I'm going to argue is not against that, but it was something that Councillor Laurie had mentioned. He had said, I kind of look at it being posted to the website as a bit of a catch-all. And so that kind of made me think, and I go, fair enough, you know, like we do want to have some sort of general knowledge of it in the community. And so along those same lines, I think, you know, I think the discussion here is we're not going to catch everyone on the website there. And we're going to miss that opportunity to have a general awareness in the community. So the other point I'd like to make is I think there's a difference between what somebody's willing to act on when they read a newspaper and what they're willing to act on when they read it on a website. And so to Councillor Pletchko's point, you open it up and you kind of get the whole kettle. For sure, I'm not sure that necessarily translates into people coming down to a council meeting to share those views. And so I'm not, well, I don't discount that that's what happens on the internet. I don't think that necessarily means that we're going to get that reaction here in the council chambers if we did add newspaper advertising to the standard or advanced, whatever we want to call that, the advanced mail out or help me here. What are we calling this? The advanced stage here.
The advanced bylaws.
Yeah.
Advertisements.
Yes, thank you. So I'm inclined to say, for the sake of a broad sort of catch-all that my fellow councillor had pointed out, I think it is a good move to make the advertisement in the paper.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Meyer. Deputy Mayor, moving over to Councillor Loyens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to sit here and listen to everybody put in their opinions, I'm in agreement with my fellow councillors, and I don't quite understand what this is going to achieve. I appreciate the merits behind it, But as discussed earlier, we've got neighborhoods that still don't get the paper, requested papers, struggle to get it. The stacks of them are found in garbage cans. And again, yes, some do get it, don't get me wrong, but I can even account for, I get it at my house, my brother lives across the street, and he doesn't get it at his house regardless of number of requests. So I struggle at, even if it is only $500 up to $5,000 a year, pick a number, to the town. That is our taxpayer dollars at work. And if that 500 to 5,000 can go somewhere else, I see the benefits in that instead. And that's all for me.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Loyens. Any other comments, debate? No. I definitely appreciate the thought and the process of bringing this forward, Councilor Anderson. I don't think I'll be supporting the motion for the amendment. I believe most of the stuff that we need to address and kind of notify our residents are covered in the bylaw and how we reach them. I think this might be a little too much in terms of the fact that we've already advertised for statutory advertising for that area already. This is now down to the more advanced side, so we've already had the rezoning. We're just looking at some differences that would actually affect those people that are in the localized area, not the overall town and community. I think we do have those options to engage our residents. And from my experience on council, it doesn't matter where we advertise and how often we advertise, we're always going to miss somebody. Somebody will always say that they missed it somewhere and somehow. But if it is an issue for the community, they will show up regardless if you advertise or not. I think we've seen that many times in our chambers, that we'll fill chambers on issues that maybe not concern certain parts of the community, but they all come and support it, because that's how it works. It's a network of people that you know. It's not advertising in the paper is not the avenue that would actually bring people out. It's the connectivity with our residents that will ask the residents to come forward. So I think I appreciate the motion to coming forward in the amendment, but I will not be supporting it. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the dialogue around the council table this evening. There's a couple things I would like to point out in closing. Just looking at page 20 of our agenda package, this is our current process prior to the public hearing and the new the bylaw before us this evening. And, up until today, there was advertisement done in the Stoney Plain Reporter once a week for 2 consecutive weeks. My motion this evening is to reduce that down to 1, but just for that advanced process that's been laid out before us. We've also removed being referred to the Planning Advisory Committee from here as well. And in some cases, we've reduced the distance for the mail out, which, as it says, loosely based on 90 to a 300-meter radius, and the new bylaw that lists it at 90 meters. And so we are already taking steps in reducing the amount of information that we're making available to our residents, and we are reducing the areas that we're making that information available to them. And so again, the motion isn't to go back to what was. I think we're still moving forward, but we're still providing that information in a way that our residents have become accustomed to. And I think that's an important piece. I don't believe every piece of information that's put out by the town has the intent of bringing people out in droves to a public hearing or to a council meeting. But it's all about people being informed about what's going on in their municipality and what's going on in their community. And we talk about wanting to have a municipality that's engaged and informed, and we want them to be active and involved in all of these pieces. And, we do have a segment, and I've heard it from members of this council that, there are people in our municipality that rely on that paper. And so again, the motion isn't to go back to what was, but just to go maybe a small step back. The second one I think to highlight is the cost benefit. For those residents that do rely on that, that maybe aren't the digital natives, didn't have the skills growing up. I know I didn't have a computer in school until I think 6th grade. There are some on council that probably didn't have one at all. I apologize for that, but that is our reality this evening. And so anytime we can make that information available, the benefit to our resident is huge for those that want that. It may not have the breadth of reach that a social media post does, but it's making it available to those that may not have that otherwise. In terms of, sort of the public discourse around some of these things, certainly on social media, it's very easy to comment and to click and to type and those sorts of things, where a newspaper, you don't have that opportunity. It's, again, just very informational. And so, I've heard the conversation. I can probably see where this is going, but I do ask council to consider for the cost and the benefit of those residents that don't have access or don't have the skills for the technology, and understanding that up until today it was once a week for 2 consecutive weeks is the current standard, that we are still moving forward, but maybe with a smaller step instead of eliminating this piece entirely.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. With that, I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's defeated. Thank you, Councilor Anderson. And back to the original motion. Any more questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay, seeing no more hands up, I'll call the question on second reading. All those in favor? Okay. Councilor Hansard for third reading, please.
Your Worship, I move that Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2681G23.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Hansard. Members of Council, we're going to third reading. Any more questions, comments, and debate on the motion? See none. Thank you, administration, for bringing this forward and providing this. Again, this is us kind of moving forward in terms of municipality. We're not going to get everything right, but I appreciate the fact that we will be reviewing this in a year to see how this has affected the community positively or negatively, and then at that point in time, council can make those changes and adjustments when required. I'll call the question. All in favor of third reading? That is carried. Okay, moving on to 8.2, which is the user fees and charges bylaw, 2682/G/23. Go ahead, administration. This was kicked back to you. Just in terms of process, do we need to make the motion to bring it back to the floor first, or can we get the presentation first?
Through your worship to council, it would be appropriate for you to make the motion to bring it back to the floor because currently it is defeated.
Okay, thank you. And on the prevailing side was Councilor Loynes. You get to make the motion, please.
Town Council reconsider motion 182/11/23/SP related to item 8.1.1 of the November 27th, 2023 regular council meeting minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Council, understand what we're voting for? Thank you. I'll call the question on favor. And that is carried. Thank you. So now moving back to motion 2. Go ahead with the presentation first.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship, through you to all of council. The bylaw in front of you serves to implement the approved corporate plan by establishing numerous fees for different town services. At the November 27th, 2023 council meeting, excuse me, there was discussion and debate related to certain planning and development fees. Council will note that the proposed fees have been removed from the bylaw presented this evening, and I wanted to speak to that specifically. On balance, Your Worship, I believe that taking some time through the first quarter of 2024 to work through some of the dialogue and review of the process related to those fees to be a reasonable approach to ensuring clarity of process and purpose. Done in a timely manner, the effects on the actual revenue are manageable and can be mitigated through administrative actions. In effect, we will utilize that time allocated just to ensure alignment and clarity on those particular fees. The alternative, Your Worship, was to provide an overview this evening, and given the ability to manage accordingly through Q1, the more fulsome process is being recommended. With that, Your Worship, I'll just ask our Manager of Finance to provide any further comment on the bylaw before you this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Town Manager, and good evening, Your Worship and Council. Presented within the agenda includes the fees and charges amended bylaw for Council consideration. The bylaw supports Council's user fee philosophy that where possible, fees cover the cost of the service to the best of their ability. This philosophy is outlined in Council Policy CFS 051, Revenue and Taxation. The fees and charges are reviewed annually by each department and adjustments are made as necessary. This process includes comparisons to other municipalities as well as analysis of cost recovery. Updates to the charges presented were mostly cleanup as well as alignment of fees as per presented in the 2024 to 2026 corporate plan. At this time, I will turn it over to you, Your Worship, for any questions from Council on the bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this back forward, and I appreciate that administration heard from council, that we appreciate some more clarity and understanding and workshop that was kind of promised, so this will give us the opportunity for council to have that workshop with administration before those amendments come forward in terms of the fees and charges. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding on the presentation? Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have page-specific items. First of all, I want to say I was so pleased to see all of those pennies go away on most of the pages in this bylaw. Am I in the right place?
That is correct, Councillor
Okay.
Hansard, but the thing is that they did not make any adjustments. They just rolled it back to the previous announcement. So nothing has been changed. It was back to what we approved last year.
So we're not seeing any rate increases?
Not for electrical building permits or plumbing.
Are we considering more than that? Because I have down here solid waste, wastewater, driving range. All of those pages were so much, there were loose pennies on everything. All of those pages have been cleaned up. Am I right or wrong about that?
You're sort of right, but sort of wrong.
I love that.
So on the waste management and stuff, it's a contracted price. So whatever the contractor provides that cost to us is divided by the number of residents, houses. So you will get the odd cents. It's not
The odd one.
It's not rounded up to a certain number. It's just divided as a service level to every dwelling unit in our community.
So you're telling me I should not be concerned that some of those hanging participle-looking numbers were not done away with?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm relieved to know that it comes from a far higher authority than council. Otherwise, are we seeing rate increases or not overall?
Yes, we are. We're seeing rate increases overall. The only thing that was removed that was changed was everything from the building permits to electrical and plumbing. So that council had a lot of questions and commentary around, and the ask was that we have a workshop. So in light of that, administration has pulled those changes from those sections so that council can have that workshop, as mentioned by the town manager, in Q1 of 2024 to revisit our policies and, are we okay with still being where we are?
And we're okay for the entire year, or will we be allowed to change those during the year?
Definitely that could come forward. I think administration was stating that we'll have that conversation with council, and if changes need to come back, then the upgrade or the amendment to this bylaw will come forward.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, you've taken care of my odd number thing, and you've explained that we're going to have a discussion about other items to get a clearer understanding, but otherwise, all of the suggested rate increases it is suggested that we move forward with those. Is that correct? Or has that already been done?
No, that is correct. So those that are marked up are the ones that are suggesting to change that did not garner the conversation around council.
So you were very gracious to tell me I was wrong on a lot of it. That was nice of you. Thank you.
No, actually, you were right, because we couldn't change those numbers because they are contracted services.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a question of clarity that's kind of come forward since this last one. Looking at page 93, it's in regards to the transit service fees. The introduction of the ARC card has created several changes, and I'm just looking for some clarity in respect to our local on-demand transit. I believe it was a communication that came out, it was either by the City of Spruce Grove or shared by the City of Spruce Grove, that we no longer would be able to accept like paper tickets or anything that had been purchased at Town Hall, purchased at the Shoppers Drug Marts that they're sold at Spruce Grove, etc., and that the only way to pay for transit service on the on-demand system going forward would be by ARC card. I believe it was as of January 1st of 2024. Can we get some clarity around that?
Okay, thank you. Administration.
Your Worship, through you, Councillor Laurie, your interpretation is correct. The paper copies that we had previously, through the City of Spruce Grove, through the contract, they would go to a vendor and they would have the passes printed. People would purchase them. And when they ran out, go to wherever, town office or city office or local stores that were selling the passes in and purchase a new paper copy of that pass. Since the implementation of the ARC system and the extension into most of the transit region in EMRB section, the desire is to, from the tracking perspective and some of the metrics that we can gain from ridership, specifically go to the ARC card in terms of people can reload that card. They don't have to purchase another paper copy of anything. It's just go and reload the card. You can do it here at the town office. There's locations around both our community and the City of Spruce Grove. So it's very similar to some of the apps you might have on your phone where you can just reload, or a Starbucks card where you can put more money on it and just carry the one card around. So people can just recharge or reload the ARC card versus the paper copy. So the phase out of the paper copy certainly is a decision that was made related to, one, it's cost savings in terms of there's a cost to print that material, and two, the ARC card has replaced that in the last 12 or so months.
So thank you. And then just to follow up on that, so that's the paper tickets. The other aspect was the cash fare. So is cash fare still going to be accepted, or is our transit system going to solely the ARC card?
Your Worship, through Councillor Laurie, my understanding is cash will still be accepted. So the fare boxes will still be dumped on a daily basis, with the hopes, I believe, that eventually there'll be less and less cash being transacted on buses from a safety perspective primarily.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that clarity. So just to summarize the discussion then, the paper tickets and previous passes that had been sold will no longer be available, but cash fare will remain available, and then all other alternatives essentially have transitioned to the ARC card.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Laurie, that's correct.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the clarity.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Any other questions, comments? Okay, see none. Definitely appreciate administration from bringing this back forward, and hearing the concerns and comments from council, and then having the ability to revisit those fees and charges a little bit later. Deputy Mayor, motion for first reading, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council give first reading to Bylaw 2682G/23, a bylaw to establish fees and charges for the provision of certain licenses, goods, and services as amended.
Okay, thank you. Any debate on the motion? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Moving on to second reading, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Town Council give second reading to bylaw 2682/G/23.
Right, again, debate on second reading? Okay, call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on to unanimous consent. I think if council deals with 3 readings in one sitting or one evening, there needs to be unanimous consent before we can continue to third reading. Councillor Hansard.
Your Worship, I move that Town Council give unanimous consent to consider third reading to bylaws 2682G23.
Thank you. Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. That's carried. Moving on to third reading. Councillor Plechko, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2682/G/23.
Okay, thank you. Any last comments, debate? No. Okay, before I call the question, just administration mentioned that, so we'll be reviewing this in the first quarter. Is there kind of a penciled-in timeframe so that council can expect something coming forward through our calendars? As you know, we're quite busy with holiday season, people on holidays, and then we also have strategic planning with council as well.
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. I wouldn't expect it to be within the first 3 weeks of January. I mean, getting back from holidays, I know that we have strategic planning and a couple other things in that week. So I wouldn't expect it to be in the first 3 weeks of January. Would expect it to be through February into maybe early March. Q1 is referenced, so that goes to the end of March. But if there were to be changes or substantial changes, so to speak, that would also have to align with the spring budget adjustments, which I think is generally through the month of April.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that, and do look forward to that, and I appreciate the fact that we'll get that done in the first quarter, so if there's any changes that need to change to the fees and charges bylaw, we can have that done prior to spring adjustment. Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. Third reading is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to business items 9.1. This is the Cultural Roundtable Citizen at Large appointment. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, through your worship, to council. So the report before you is just advising council that at the organizational meeting in October, we did have a few vacancies on some of our committees, the Cultural Roundtable being one of them. So one of the current members who did not originally put their application forward to be reappointed after the organizational meeting did submit their application for appointment. So administration is recommending that we reappoint this member to that committee.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that. There is the backgrounder. Just before I turn over to council, it says the applicant for a 2-year term, second term, but it expires the end of this month. So are we appointing this person for the 20 plus days?
Through your worship, to council, that's an error on the lead sheet. This individual would be reappointed for 2 years, starting January 1st, 2024.
And then so it'll expire December 31st, 2025.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, members of council, any questions for clear understanding? See none. Councilor Lowry for the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council appoint Patty McKay to the Cultural Roundtable.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that is carried. Okay, moving on to number 10, which is council discussion. This is the time that council members can bring issues and concerns that we heard from residents to administration, or just to share amongst council so that we're aware of certain things that are happening in the community. We'll start with Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick note, obviously, we've seen our administration working diligently on it, and I'll express my appreciation to it, but we've seen a significant uptick in graffiti vandalism throughout the community over the last several weeks and months. So just I guess, a plea to residents, if they do have any information, if they do see any of this type of activity going on, to definitely report it. It's always easier when things get reported. We can track it better, we can address it better, we can put in the required actions in order to help prevent and deal with it when possible. So again, kudos to our administration and our staff for the work that they've done to get out there and clean it, the work that they've done with the businesses to encourage them, the residents to encourage them as well to take care of it, and hopefully we don't see too much of that going on. Other than that, with this being our last meeting before Christmas, which when you look outside, it doesn't really look that way, but just wanted to wish council colleagues, staff, etc., all a great, happy, healthy holiday season. Hope you all enjoy it, stay safe, get some rest, and looking forward to coming back and getting going in 2024.
Thank you, Councilor Lowry. Councilor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Well, the festive season is upon us, even though we have lots to do. There's still lots of committee meetings going on and stuff like that. So I encourage each one of you, when you're going to your committee meetings, to travel safe throughout the festive season and stay on top of that. And I look forward to the reports. I as well would like to wish everyone from administration a Merry Christmas this year. I hope that your festive season is greatly upon you and that you get to spend some quality time with your family. And to council, I'm sure we'll see you at multitude of events. So between now and Christmas time, have a Merry Christmas, even though I'll continue to see you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hansard, please.
Your worship, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. First of all, I want to thank administration, our senior leadership team, actually every one of our staff members, and I hope senior leadership takes this message back to them. Council looks awfully good because of everything that the people in these buildings do. So we thank you very much for that. We would not near walk so tall if you are not there to support us and do all the things you do to enable our job to be better. I really do wish a happy holiday season to all of you. And I hope that everyone remembers there's no just anything in the positions in Stony Plain. They are all important. They are all valued by council, and I believe that everyone up here is very grateful to you, and we're your biggest fans. So thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Councillor Anderson?
Well, I guess I get to sound like a broken record as well, but health, hope, and happiness to council, to staff, to residents in the municipality. We hope you have a restful, relaxing holiday full of food, family, friends, and wherever that takes you. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
I got to take my hat off there, Councillor Anderson. You sure cut that down pretty short, so, but I'll got you beat. I'll just say ditto. Merry Christmas to you guys and everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Loynes?
Thank you, Worship. Before I say Merry Christmas to everybody, I wanted to mention that on Wednesday, there is Let's Talk About Racism and Discrimination at the Youth Center for the youth age 11 to 17 from 4:30 to 6:30. And just with everything going on, I think it's important that we remind our youth that it is okay to get help. Special thanks to our Public Works and Infrastructure team. They had the trucks out in the Greybrier neighborhood sanding, even though we haven't had a lot of snow and rain or anything like that. There were some icy spots, and they went out and sanded it for their Stony Plain Lane on Saturday. So muchly appreciated there. Thirdly, to administration, for Community Protective Services. There's been a lot of concerns lately about people speeding by buses when they have their stop sign out. And I was wondering if we can have some bylaw officers in and around the schools before and after and see if there's something we can do to prevent that, if at all possible.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Loynes, so specifically St. Matt's School or another school or a few schools?
It's a few schools in general. It was brought to my attention over by Meridian Heights especially. It seems to be an issue along 46-ish area by the old police station, which is a common area for people to speed in general, but.
Yeah. Your Worship, through the Councillor Loynes, certainly we can put that on our CPO's dashboard to increase the patrols there, and certainly can talk to with our ATE operator if Meridian is one of those areas that certainly a zone that we have approved for that that particular type of enforcement also.
Awesome, muchly appreciated. And then yes, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of council, staff, your families, and our residents. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So again, just wanted to highlight and thank our staff for the work that they're doing in terms of pedestrian safety and safety overall in our community. If you have not yet been in Willow Park, the access to St. John Paul II School, there has been additional safety measures applied to Willow Way Road, I think, Willow Park Road, where kind of there's a little bit of kind of markers and cement barriers to allow the more safe crossing of our residents and students that go back and forth. I think that's one of the issues, concerns that council has been focusing on is pedestrian safety and definitely overall safety in our community. And it's good to see things like the high visible signs and more of the kind of delineated marking areas and crossings for residents and students alike. So I look forward to seeing those continue. So again, kudos to our staff for doing that. And I also want to just thank all the partners that have partnered up with the Kinsman Christmas Hampers. This last weekend was the final push as the Kinsman and the Kinsnet are getting together and putting the hampers together. That will serve over roughly 700 members from Stony Plain West. And there's over about 650 that the Spruce Grove Connects serve from Spruce Grove to the east. So again, I think that's a wonderful thing that our community does, is to support those programs to help those people that are going through a rough time. And as talking to the Kinsmen, it's never a handout, it's always a hand up, because sometimes we run into some difficulties, not to our own fault, but it's nice to have a little hand up there so that you don't feel so alone, especially during this Christmas season. Okay. And for those that are still around during the Christmas season, the Town Stony Plain has their first night event on December 31st down at Heritage Park. So definitely thank all the sponsors and volunteers that make it work, and also our staff to put it on, because it is a great evening if you've not been out there. There's lots to do. There's sleigh rides, there's events inside the pavilion, and there's also fireworks. So something for us to kind of get together and gather and celebrate the holiday season. Okay. Moving on, members council, we do have a closed session item tonight, going to number 11 of our agenda. So during closed session, there is one motion to go into closed session. There are no motions made in closed session except for the motion to come out of closed session. Town council will be going to closed session to deal with section 24 and section 17 of the Freedom of Information Protection Act. So with that, there will be a small recess after I call the question to go into closed session to allow the certain individuals to leave the chambers, and then to have council and administration that needs to be here for closed session. Okay. And if you'd like to be notified when council comes out of closed session, you can definitely let our legislative clerk know, or send an email to legislator@stonyplain.com, and then you'll be notified when council is ready to come out of closed session. Deputy Mayor, motion for closed session, please.
Yes, thank you. I make a motion that town council move into closed session to discuss per FOIP section 24 and 27, surplus property and insurance and legal update.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. We'll take a 10-minute recess while the chambers is cleared out and the proper people are in the room. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Council has come out of closed session. The only motion that was made in closed session was made by Councillor Anderson to move out of closed session, and that was passed 7-0. Administration, has anybody registered to be notified when council comes out of closed session?
Through your worship, no, there has not been.
Okay. See that nobody has been asked to notify that coming out of closed session. We'll move on with our agenda. So there's a couple motions that has risen out of closed session. 11.1, and it's on the screen right now. Councillor Hansard.
Your worship, I move that town council, in accordance with land management policy CCAO 0591, declare 4801 52 Avenue surplus municipal property in the town of Stony Plain. 2, authorize administration to dispose of 4801 52 Avenue. And 3, direct the proceeds from the disposal of the land to the general purpose reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Members of council, any debate on the motion? Okay, call the question, all in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to 11.2, Councillor Pacheco.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The town council accept the insurance and legal update for information.
Okay. Any debate on the motion? Okay, call the question, all in favor? That is carried. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, members of council, that comes to the close of our agenda, to adjournment. So on behalf of council, we wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. As this is our last meeting, we will not be back until the second week of January. So wishing everybody to have a great time with their family. And as we mentioned many times around this chambers, it is time to be festive and have fun, but please do not drink and drive. I want to make sure that everybody gets home safely, and so that we can continue to spend countless years with our loved ones. With that, administration, thank you for another great year of providing packages for us. I know council has pushed and challenged each and every one of our senior leadership team, because that's what our job is, to ask the hard questions and make sure that the community is moving forward in the direction that matches our strategic plan. So thank you for the work on that. With that, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. We're adjourned.